Live streaming is on.
Okay, here we are. We're back at the World from Here, and I'm very excited today because we've got some very special panelist guests. And this morning we're going to talk about new digital business models and how those models are changing the real landscape of business. You know, it's exciting in a week where we're hearing from top business leaders like Mark Cuban, who are talking about the benefits of blockchain and how it varies similarly to him. And really, I said this last week, which is similar to the internet and the introduction of the internet, and just how crazy that sounded at the time, and how crazy this might sound to others in terms of blockchain. But it really is changing the landscape of business in the future. And this morning, as always, we're joined by Mr. Tim Vasko, who's the CEO of BlockCerts Blockchain and the chief architect and founder. Good morning to you, Tim. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It is an interesting and exceptional week. I'm super excited to hear from our guests and talk about what these innovators are doing in a situation and making a tough world much better.
Absolutely. And Daniele Mensi, who's the president of FusionSTX. As always, it's your evening coming to us live from Italy, and good to see you this evening, Daniele.
Thank you, Dan. Good to see you. Good to see you all. And obviously, that's my appointment before my glass of wine.
Oh, and not before, huh?
It was an incredible week this week for us. It's a BlockCerts and Fusion, and also what happened in the market, in the stock market, in the bond market, in the cash market, and the crypto market. Right. There's a lot that happened this week. And I think next week will be very interesting. I think perhaps we'll cover something because there might be some great news coming in for us and for the markets.
Absolutely. Just an amazing time in business, and great time to be alive here. So,
well, and to that end, Dan, I think, to kick this off, it was interesting that President Biden announced that the SBA loans, listen to this, the SBA loans are going to be extended into March 9th, and for companies with employees, only for companies with employees under number 20 employees. So that tells you a little bit about the entrepreneurial spirit and the belief of what's going to make this recovery and this next world happen, right? Yeah, under 20 employees. So with that, I'm super excited to hear about the innovators out there that have the guts and the courage and the, ideas to make this all happen and make this next world from here really impressive.
Well, and to that end, Tim, governments are realizing that we need our entrepreneurs, we need our startups, because that's the backbone of real business. So very exciting here. So we're joined here this evening or this morning, wherever you come from, with Elisabeth Dana. And Elisabeth is a growth and wealth expert. She's been with many of the top financial institutions in the world, and she's the founder of Infinity Circle. And we look forward to hearing more from you and asking some questions about Infinity Circle. So good evening, Elisabeth.
Good evening, Dan. Good evening, everyone. Good evening from London, because I realize it's not your evening.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and you joined us at the Singapore FinTech Festival and some of the other events we've had. So it's great to see you again, and I can't wait to hear just the progress that you've had in terms of your business too. So we'll get back to that here in a second. And we also are joined by Lionel Bernard, and Lionel is a PhD. He's an entrepreneur. He's had a number of companies that have had success circling him, and he's got an exciting business model. It actually has a mobile banking solution in Africa for both unbanked and for those that it really does not work in terms of mobile banking. And we're going to hear more about that. And he currently has a license and ready to go to really change the landscape. And I'm very excited about this one as well, just because it really integrates with what we're doing at the DFSO through Columbia University and with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in terms of the unbanked and really stopping the circle of poverty. So thanks for joining us here, Lionel, and we look forward to hearing from you here in a minute.
Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Daniele. We're old friends, but we always have new things to talk about. Thanks for
Yeah, we
having me on the
do.
show.
Well, and every time we talk, there is something new because of what you're accomplishing there. So, with that, let's share a little bit about Elisabeth and talk about the problems that you see in the market. And with that, I know Daniele, you've got some questions as well. So
yeah, I'd like to make just 1 minute intro here,
yes,
because to me, 2021 is the year of the new digital wealth. And probably you heard, some guys like Michael Saylor and others, Raoul Pal, and similar ex-Goldman Sachs guys, including JP Morgan analyst yesterday on CNBC. So the whole wealth of the whole world, we're talking about 300 trillion, okay, in assets as a whole, is going to be redefined this year. And if you think about the Bitcoin is on the mouth of everyone and it captured only 1 trillion, think about what is the potential of the wealth as a whole industry. So I'm very happy to start talking with Elisabeth and his project, because I think
here as well. So wanted to talk about that. You might share about why.
This is a paradigm shift. This is an acceleration. I mean, change has been in the air for a decade in terms of digitization and decentralization, but everything is accelerating. And this year is the last year, and this year is so important because it's really, I think everybody's concentrating their efforts to digitize. In wealth management, there is, as you said, a massive opportunity because there is, there's, well, you said 300 trillion of private wealth.
Yeah.
Double-digit growth that concerns every part of the world. So, the concentration is not just in a few big cities. We're talking worldwide, global assets. And until now, wealth management is still done in a very traditional, male-dominated, centralized, old-fashioned, restricted, conflicted manner. And everything is still yet to be done. And so it's a massive opportunity to be in an industry where the change is needed, change is happening, and the upside and the size of the target market is so gigantic. So it is very exciting. So the problem, we have this on the screen, exclusive 1%er club. And again, I think what the pandemic is really shedding light on is how wealth is not distributed in an equal manner, and the divide between those who have and those who have not at all is really dramatically increasing, and it will have repercussions in society globally. So, beyond this paradigm shift and the notion of decentralizing and redistributing, there is already a business opportunity which Infinity Circle is seizing, is creating a private market for wealth management.
Yeah, that is to make a comment on top of what I was saying before. I think providing alternatives as into the wealth space on top of what the digital assets ecosystem like DeFi and others already position their solution. I think it's key from let me call it from a user experience point of view, because if we see the blockchain as a whole, including DeFi, they have a very cumbersome experience, right? So I think addressing, in this case, the traditional clients, being, for example, family offices and so on, with an enhanced or aligned user experience, it's very key to deliver real value to the market, right?
Absolutely, and I would say now you have a whole new generation also of clients who are expecting a solution which is at their fingertips, where there's immediacy, where transacting is simplified, where all the very kind of tedious bureaucratic part of wealth management is totally streamlined and kind of taken care of for them, you know. So I think the timing is right. The market is ready, and that is a very exciting reality. Moving on, you know, beyond the problem, beyond how wealth management up until now remains very traditional.
Well,
I
and
think
Elisabeth, I wanted to just kind of point out something you said as well, which is kind of that 1%er club. I love that, by the way, because it is the 1%er club. And when we look at this, I want to go back to a couple weeks ago when GameStop hit.
Yeah.
And, you know, the understanding of how financial markets are shaping up differently. We hear Daniele talk about it. It's very complex.
Yeah.
They've always been complex. It's always been a complex market. The difference is this distribution of information, the speed at which information is done, and the speed at which it can be acted upon is quite different. We also talk about in blockchain a lot transparency. So that transparency of information that actually forced Robinhood to stop trading. It was an interesting anomaly. I think it was lost on most people that when Wall Street was shorting that stock, there's a centralized repository. Shorting means they're borrowing against those assets. And the reason Robinhood stopped it, the CEO came out and said, hey, we had to come up with $3.4 billion, a $3.4 billion capital call to cover for the 2-day settlement period, which means that if one of those firms defaulted, Robinhood would be stuck because they're in the middle. It was the definition of centralization that not only allowed that to happen, but also forced the hand of a so-called trading platform that was distributed. And it was because it's all around this business model that's been created by Wall Street and the ages of being able to allow these kinds of transactions. So when we look at DeFi and we look at these emerging models that you're educating people on and helping them get involved with Infinity Circle, it truly is infinity, isn't it? It truly is this infinite possibility of eliminating all of these kind of contained 1%er clubs where, hey, there's margin made by the guys who are lending. And the lenders are just acting like a bank saying, Robinhood, you need to cover $3.4 billion because if Joe brokerage firm over here on his short position can't cover it, you have to do it. That's really what happened. That's why Robinhood ceased trading, and that's now on record in front of the authorities. So I just would like to get your view on that 1%er club, just a little bit more, and then we can jump into this kind of problem space of how that's been exclusive as opposed to inclusive. But how will you actually, how do you envision the idea of wealth management in the next generation that allows groups to participate in the market when it is so transparent and these things move so fast?
Well, I think, when indeed you have transparency, you have data, you have vetted opportunities, you are in a circle of trust, and you're let into the circle and you are sitting at the table, then, everybody has the opportunity to partake. The way Infinity Circle specifically is going to implement that is that we're going to not require a minimum level of wealth for clients to come to join, to be users on the platform. And we're going to structure fractional ownership of any type of asset. So we're going to let investors, younger investors who are aspirational, and not yet established in terms of level of personal wealth still participate in private markets and in the markets by just enabling them to enter in at a much lower level of the transaction.
And I love that, because I have to tell you, my kids, most people know I've got 5 and of all ages, but my kids are all talking about investing now. I've been in this industry all my life. This is the first time in the last 3 weeks that my kids are like, "Hey, Dad, so what about that investing stuff?" Right?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We come from a world where these skills were, and we had that conversation with Daniele, I think on the Singapore panel, is that today, or up until now, the education about money, how you behave with money, how you invest money, how you produce more money with money, how you generate returns, has never been part of our kind of education, and something that was, you know, when we were 8 or 10 or 15, we would not come up with, well, we're not Warren Buffett, but we wouldn't come up with the idea of investing, and that investing was available and accessible.
Exactly. And that's the whole idea of getting into inclusion. So now we kind of have this collision of knowledge as well as the ability to be included in the system. And I think that's what's fascinating about Infinity Circle, is this idea of inclusion. So maybe, you know, get in on that. I mean, tell us how people or what digital inclusion actually means in your perspective, and how big that scale is. Daniele said, what'd you say, 300 trillion, Daniele?
300 trillion if you put
300 trillion. 300 trillion.
Yeah.
This is not a little market. That's with a T.
Not
right?
at all. Not at all.
Yeah. And Tim, you might stop the screen share. We're getting a little crackling there because of the screen share. There we go.
So let me pick up on
Thank you.
what digital inclusion is in wealth management. So before founding Infinity Circle, I have been a banker, and I've been a banker for 16 years in big banks. Stayed a decade in a bank this side of the pond called Barclays Bank, and had a book of clients, went out there as a banker and found some wealthy clients and managed their money. Now at the bank, as part of the wealth management team, 400 bankers doing kind of focusing on wealth management for wealthy people all around the world, based in London. The minimum entry point for our clients, and that's a decision that came from a specific point. Because of the costs to serve in a big bank, our minimum entry level, our clients needed to have at least £10 million liquid investable wealth to even kind of be invited to come and have a chat.
Who doesn't have?
You didn't even pick up the phone for less than £10 million.
Exactly.
No, that's chump change.
And investable wealth. So we're not talking about your homes and your boats and your whatever the type of
liquid.
We're talking liquid available on an account. Was the entry, you know, that's the invite you needed to show at the door to get in and to get access to our services. Now, that's because of the old model, because we had to be a bank the way we had to be, with the teams and the regulatory and the compliance and a physical interaction with the client. And today with technology, that is all obsolete. We don't need to have that old-fashioned way of doing business, which means that with a digital platform, you know, you create a bespoke digital platform, whether for clients, whether you have, it's a totally different model, whether you have 40 clients, which is what I had at Barclays, for instance. I had 40 families, that perhaps represents 100 individuals. Whether you have 100 individuals or you have 1,000 or 1 million individuals using your platform to get information about wealth management, to access deals and transact and get on-demand advice, the fixed costs are the same, and we're talking about near zero marginal cost. So every single client that comes up, the cost decreases almost instead of increasing. So
we're not paying for those marble floors anymore at the top of the Barclays Tower in London.
Exactly, or the wooden paneled old-fashioned
That's right.
London clubs,
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a totally different environment, but in fact, in terms of business model, we are able, thanks to the scalability of the proposition and of the tech, to welcome people with nothing near that amount of wealth, but who would still benefit from the same information, at least the advice, access to deals, the understanding. And so, in fact, we're extremely blessed to be living in this period, to have all these tools and to be able to come up with new business models that are very pertinent and enable financial inclusion. So on our platform, no minimum level of wealth required, and you can invest in proportion to the wealth you have access to.
And here's what's exciting about that is not only are you driving inclusion, you're driving education.
Absolutely.
You're driving distribution.
Yep.
Where you're enabling a new generation to look at their financial perspective, and everybody's got a different one. Maybe you have boats and multiple homes and things like that, and maybe you don't.
Absolutely.
But education, or maybe you're, as my kids, in university or out of university already, or what have you, or just starting university and things like that. Maybe you have a little bit of disposable income and you read about GameStop and you're like, gee, I wonder how that works. And you can throw a few $100s at it and build out a structure where that energy can be put into innovation. That's what the younger generation is going to do. I get calls every week by all these brilliant young people that are saying, I don't want to go to work in a traditional job. And I'm like, good, 50% of them are gone anyway. Right? So when we look at that, we're like, well, and that's what it really excites me about Infinity Circle is you're taking that perspective of someone who's been on the inside in the 1%er club, by the way. Thank you for coming to this side of the world.
Yeah, thanks for helping the rest of us.
Yeah, and saying, look, this is how it works. This is how you can actually get information at the same level, and we're leveling the playing field for a new generation of wealth creation.
Absolutely. And with any kind of priority, all clients have different priorities, but whether it's a sustainable, clean, distributed, it doesn't have to be welcome, charitable, investing in medical research. I mean, charity in itself, charitable giving in itself is an asset class, which we will have on the platform. So, everybody has different priorities with their money.
If someone has no understanding about investment, about equities, about stock whatsoever, so is there any education kind of a step to be done before someone is asking for advices, or what is the process for newbies?
Well, there will be a lot of explaining different asset classes, how to think about it, how any asset class fits into how an individual can diversify his wealth. There'll be a deal flow and a lot of possible investments, and each investment will come with a tutorial that explains, okay, so we've just presented you this opportunity. This is actually that type of asset class. It's an alternative asset class. This is how traditionally it's been viewed. This is how it can serve you. And then, so a lot of information, specific tutorials. Every deal will come with a tutorial. And then clients will have the users on the platform will have the ability to ask for ad hoc advice. So if they're unsure, if they're not comfortable to do to transact on a self-directed basis, they can then on the platform request whether it's a physical or virtual discussion with a qualified advisor and get advice, and not be kind of stuck with one advisor, constantly, who takes a percentage of the client's assets for the whole year.
Right.
To be, normally to get advice in wealth management, you agree to pay, let's say, 1% of your assets as a retainer for ongoing advice.
Yeah.
Okay, not everybody is in a position to pay 1% of everything they have to get some guidance. This is ad hoc advice. You can ask for advice. It can be continuous. It can be really specific to a transaction or a circumstance. So you have flexibility.
And so what I'd like to point out, and we're going to move on, but what I'd like to point out, Elisabeth, is first of all, when we started out, I wanted to thank both you and Lionel and the people who are joining Fusion Funder for having guts and courage. Like, you stepped out of that world where it was pretty comfortable, I'm sure, in those wood paneled clubs, and said, look, there needs to be a better way. So first of all, thank you for that. Secondly, thank you for being an innovator and brilliant at what you are doing. And what I'd like to encourage everybody to do is to visit Fusion Funder and learn more about Infinity Circle. Now you know what a brilliant business model looks like and what wealth management and wealth advising looks like in the future. This isn't just an algorithm. This is people. This is people who have the experience, this knowledge, and are creating these distributable assets, digital assets, to help reshift, as Daniele started this out, reshift $300 trillion. I'm going to keep saying that this whole time, like 300 trillion. That's
and even more.
That's even more than it cost to go see Elisabeth when she was at Barclays.
Wow.
Absolutely. And even more than,
Just a fraction.
300 trillion is just one metric. The other metric is that the cash, whatever, the US dollar or whatever, the euro, the yuan, whatever, is debased at almost 20% a year, a little bit less. So again, this is not a financial advice, and we are not soliciting investment in whatsoever direction, but it is just a personal recommendation that today, cash is trash. It's really true.
Yeah, and get involved. I mean, the whole idea here is contact us, get involved. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are changing. Dan brought up the DFSO. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles for all of these new business models to go through, but contact us. Follow us, get involved, and follow what's happening at Infinity Circle, what's happening at Fusion Funder. We're going to do a lot more of this because we are about to change the way all of this stuff is happening. And speaking of change, Lionel, what I'd like to do, and Elisabeth, thank you so much. I mean, this means a lot to all of us that you took the time on your evening, because you can go have a glass of wine after this as well, and spend the time on the world from here and getting us going. And Lionel, let's talk a little bit about, we talk about courage and we talk about shifting the way inclusion is happening and so forth. And we've got Wleepay Mobile Bank. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what this is about, and give us the idea. Give us the idea of what you see as the future, and where you came from, and what we're thinking about. You know your market, and I'm super excited to hear about it. I think you're on mute, Lionel.
Tim, thanks for your question, and thanks for having me today. Elisabeth brought up some really good points related to, financial inclusion, access to wealth management, and she's making a really concerted effort to democratize or expand access to wealth management. As you mentioned, there's a high bar mark which most of us can't afford to gain the advice necessary to enter that world of wealth management. Wleepay is, we're in the same, we're on the same path as far as financial inclusion and expanding access to financial services, but we're doing it more in the African market, and our objective is to ensure that a lot of Africans, 40% of Africans don't have access to a bank, primarily because they live in rural areas. Most of the technologies that have been introduced over the past 20 or 30 years typically bypass the continent, or arrives or is adapted quite late in the game. But ironically, the mobile banking and mobile money banking specifically, Africa is the leader and the creator of that market, starting with M-Pesa in 2005, establishing the first mobile money banking platform. Initially, there was slow adoption, but what we're seeing now is the African market remains the fastest growing mobile money market in the world. In some, and that's mainly out of necessity, as well as the technology that's available in that part of the world right now. So Wleepay is all about. I established this company primarily to tackle several problems that exist in Africa, specifically in West Africa, which is the fastest growing market in the world right now. One of those.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in there, Lionel. Not to be lost, but 460 million
with a B
unbanked. 460 million. Let's put that in perspective just for 1 minute. 460 million unbanked. That's 1.5 times the entire United States that has no banking facility.
Absolutely. It's
put it in perspective.
Which huge. Means a farmer can't get a loan. It means you're dealing in cash, all the things that you
unbanked.
About. Yeah.
Unbanked.
And it's a factor of infrastructure limitations in that part of the world. There are not as many roads as there are in the West. The telecom infrastructure is still, it's penetrating certain areas, but it's not there yet. But on the flip side to that, even though 40% of the Africa's 1.3 billion people don't have access to banks, and that number is just an estimate. I'm sure on a practical level, the numbers are much bigger than that. Even though 40% don't have access to banks, 60 to 70% now have access to cell phones.
That's right.
Smartphones. So that creates an opportunity to provide services directly to that medium, financial services, agribusiness services. And you're seeing a lot of growth in that, in providing services directly to cell phones, either analog phones, the older phones that don't have a nice GUI interface, or smartphones, which is growing significantly because the cost of these phones are going down. So, unbanked in Africa is a huge, 1.5 times the size of the U.S. population, almost even more than the size of the entire EU. I'm not sure with UK included or not. But it's a
they're not sure either. But did I just say that? But one thing I want to tell you, Lionel, and this Wleepay is a really important evolution. And when I first started on blockchain in 2014, I sent a group of 17 MBAs to India to look at the unbanked population and go deal with all of that. They came back with a report. It was part of a cohort project, and they came back with a report on all of these things that you point out. So that was 2014, at the very beginning, early stages of Bitcoin and so forth. And what I was researching was, could we actually create an environment that's safer, than transporting money. In some cases, making payroll, it takes 2 to 3 days each way for that cash to go out and come back to the people who actually get paid. So think about the cash business and the risk on that alone, just carrying that payroll back and forth. Secondly, we looked at the M-Pesa, and M-Pesa might be a lot lost on a lot of people, but M-Pesa was an early stage digital money that Vodafone actually came up with. And by the time it started hitting its peak, and I think it was Kenya, wasn't it? It hit 80% of GDP in Kenya. I believe my numbers are still correct. It's been a while. Was being pushed through M-Pesa. And the third one I want to point out, and the reason I'm saying this is not something that happened overnight. This is not something that was needed. It's been recognized for a long time. There's a bank called the Grameen Bank. And the Grameen Bank started making microloans, and I want to say in Bangladesh, but I'm not sure if that's where they started. I'm pretty sure that is. And it became the most profitable bank in the world, making microloans. I'm talking $10, $20, but the founder of it, much like you, who was a professor and a PhD, was unable to get any traditional banks to back that because they were convinced that people would not pay back the loans. The actual statistic is 97% of all of the loans are paid back, which far outstrips what traditional banking lending is. So these are business models that are sound. So both in the world of unbanked, and there are proven successes, and in the world of wealth management with robo-advisors and things, proven successes. And we're at a pivotal point now where these new technologies are just available, and you can do this. Whereas, 6, 7, 10 years ago, this stuff was impossible. And Elisabeth, you alluded to it, like you couldn't do it. Even if you wanted to, or it was recognized, you couldn't do it. Dan brought up the DFSO. That actually, Lionel, I don't know if you knew this, they started researching M-Pesa 10 years ago. 10 years ago. So all of these things are converging into this ability that is now only possible and apparent.
Yeah, Tim. Yeah. Just wanted to give also the example of what happens right now in Nigeria. Probably you follow the news. So Nigeria is the country in the world that has by far the highest number of searches on the word Bitcoin on Google, which means something. But even more, a couple of weeks ago, the Central Bank of Nigeria shut down the bank accounts for the crypto exchanges, preventing people in Nigeria to buy Bitcoin. So right now, people in Nigeria can buy Bitcoin, yes, but at $71,000, while the spot price is 50. Okay, yeah. So that's the reality. So even today, while we have still digital currency or digital asset as Bitcoin, people have no access. So the fact that we think, okay, here you go to an exchange and then you get it, is not true, because you have to on-ramp first, you have to KYC, you need to have a document. So still on the current digital asset landscape, the fundamental problem of the inclusion is not yet solved.
So how do you see this framework, Lionel, like really reshaping what this is? I mean, we know there's a massive mobile infrastructure. We know there are tons of opportunities to look at. This is going to work. Like, there's not a question of if it's going to work. I think I need to point that out. This is actually a proven business model. Unlike a lot of things, this one is actually a proven business model.
Well, Tim, now, especially if it's so bad now. I mean, looking at what Lionel and your business is doing, it's going from one little where we are now to such a higher level. It's an incredible improvement in service.
Yeah. So how do you see that happening? I mean, tell us what the infrastructure is going to look like.
Yeah. The common element in what Tim and Daniele mentioned is access, and digital transformation in the form of mobile banking, in the form of wealth management, in the form of M-Pesa, in the form of all these technologies that bring services, unmet demand for certain services directly into the hands of customers. It's a new normal. So, what I see happening is that a lot of these developing countries or emerging markets that were underserved before now have the fundamentals in place in terms of infrastructure, or have infrastructure that's improving, telecommunications infrastructure that's improving. Most of them had 2G infrastructure. Now that's improving to 3 and 4G. And this is facilitating entrepreneurs and those who are pioneers to explore opportunities for bringing services using this medium. Hence the emergence of M-Pesa in Kenya. We started off as a pilot in 2005 or 6. They weren't sure if it was going to work. In India, which has a much more advanced telecommunications infrastructure, higher bandwidth, much more bigger, broader mobile penetration than even most countries around emerging markets around the world. It was an easy sell. But that had to be tied to also opening up regulation within each of those countries. So India, for example, opened up regulation to allow mobile banking and also tie that in with identity management in their country, because mobile banking is safer with better identity management. The same thing happened in Kenya when they introduced mobile M-Pesa back in 2005. The reason why it exploded to the point where currently 80% of Kenyans have a M-Pesa account and use it on a daily basis. M-Pesa has replaced cash, and it also has exposed some of the shortcomings in cash dependency. In that cash, it can be lost or stolen. Cash is not as portable, as digital currency. So all these factors culminated into the transformation that we're seeing in digital financial services in emerging markets, for example. And it also facilitated the introduction of certain services that solve the problem of access to banks, access to financial services. It democratized, like I said earlier, what Elisabeth is doing with with wealth management. This was an exclusive domain for certain wealthy individuals. Now she's taking that and making it accessible to people who don't have as large of an income or assets as as the threshold is for wealth management. And so Wleepay, we're doing the exact same thing. We're introducing a financial instrument that allows our customers who are in rural areas. I mean, these are really, sometimes there's limited electricity, the roads are really bad. These are village settings, but they do have a cell phone. I've been to parts of the world where this is the norm there, and they use their cell phone for contacting relatives in urban areas to send them funds. We used to have to go to MoneyGram facilities or some other cash facilities or an agent to get the money. We're facilitating that in that we're allowing you to not only receive funds from remittance from overseas, but locally directly to your wallet, but also enable you to use the funds in your wallet to buy goods and services directly instead of having to transfer your digital currency into physical cash, and you're right back in the problem of having to use cash, which is not secure. There's also one thing that I want to mention is that's causing the financial revolution across the emerging markets, specifically the markets that we're targeting, is there's a lot of mistrust of banks. A lot of the banking sector throughout Africa are designed to service the elites, those who have a ton of money, sort of like wealth management. They're not everywhere because, as you can, the business model of a bank is such that it's not scalable. You can't build a bank everywhere. It's a physical entity. And to use an analogy, this is why Amazon is beating the brick and mortar commerce operations, because Amazon is virtual. So mobile financial services has gone virtual from a legacy banks that you have to have physical access to a virtual banks that can be accessed directly from your phone on demand. So it solves that problem of access and mistrust of banks, because typically, I mean, these are some stories that I've experienced myself and I've heard, is that if you go to a bank in most of the African market, if you're not a prominent customer, they charge you a fee for cashing a check, like you were saying. They charge you a fee for withdrawing your funds, which is ridiculous from a Western standard, but it's the norm there.
And also, Lionel, don't you actually have to physically go into a bank to open a bank account?
Go into a bank.
Yeah.
If you live in a rural setting that's, say, about 100 kilometers from the nearest bank, you've got to spend money on transportation to go to this physical location. You got to stand in line, sometimes for hours. So those are some of the practical.
Well, there's another interesting study, which is it's also a gender problem, where when you go to a bank, you're required to give a phone number, and females get and your address, and females are afraid to go into the bank and give this personal information for safety purposes to the people that are handling their accounts, their phone number, their address, their personal information. And so we now have a further separation between the gender and the person that's trying to become banked. So, these are the kinds of issues you're solving. And I want to point out that, going back to Grameen Bank, which is, I just looked it up, it's a $7.5 billion institution. That actually was founded in 1983. So the thing I love about what you're doing is you're taking something that was recognized a very long time ago, and you're advancing that into this broad population that even that bank wasn't able to reach. And I'll point out another thing for everybody watching, that Muhammad Yunus, who is the founder of Grameen Bank, also won the Nobel Prize for founding the bank and microfinance. So you're looking at truly how impactful these business models are. This is a new generation of transformation in the world. And when we're recognizing the founding of a bank with a Nobel Prize, what does that tell you, right? So again, courage and the fortitude to come up and say, hey, we can do this better. My hat's off to you. I mean, it's not easy to start any business, but much less the businesses you guys are really taking from what you could be doing in more comfortable circumstances than being entrepreneurs and penetrating markets that are very, very difficult to shift.
And Tim, you mentioned something that's sort of a really touchy subject, and that's gender bias in banking. It's very prevalent, particularly in Africa. What most people don't know is that in the African community, most of the income generation is by women, because they're small merchants. They sell goods and services. So they're the sort of the breadwinners in most of the African the rural settings. And you're absolutely right. Them gaining access to financial services has been a big problem for a very long time. And Grameen Bank that you mentioned tapped into that demand in that underserved market of women who need access to banking, because they have money from their various trade and various services. But what's happening now is that a lot of the women are establishing, at least in the African market, they're establishing these lending groups. They're called susus. They're called different things throughout the world. And what these groups do is that they give them money to one person every month, and or they pool their money together every month. And every month one person is selected to receive a loan from the collective amount that was that's generated from the members of that group. So they've created their own community lending.
So peer-to-peer lending. Basically,
peer-to-peer lending, but more of a community way. And as far as micro lending, there's a strong demand for that. There are a lot of programs out there. It's one of the features that Wleepay plans to introduce on our platform to allow our customers to attain small loans, $300 or less, and be vetted and approved within minutes, and applying directly from their phones. So this is definitely a problem that we're trying to address as well. Is how do these women who sell their goods and products to sustain their families and their livelihood, how do they get access to capital, small micro loans, quickly, expeditiously, and without a significant fee? So those are some of the things that we're trying to tackle as well. I'm glad that Jermaine, took the initial steps to introducing this service, but that's spreading throughout the continent and other emerging markets. There's a strong demand for micro lending services.
But I was talking to a friend of mine who's based in the US this week, and we were talking about DeFi, specifically peer-to-peer lending or DeFi lending, right? So, and I was asking him, do you think the West of the world really need peer-to-peer lending? Do we really need it? So we can argue yes or not, but if we compare which side of the world really need peer-to-peer lending, say Africa, versus what people have in the West countries where there's no problem to get a lending in whatever platform. You can argue how much you have to pay to borrow, to lend money, okay? At the end of the day, you have it. So banking provides this service. It might be more efficient if you go on a DeFi platform, you might have a higher APY, but still you get it. While in Africa, you don't get it. So,
I'm sorry.
My point here is that there are part of the world where those services are prevented at all. You can't get it. While there are other part of the world that, for example, DeFi is just, in my view, a marginal improvement for some services. I'm not talking about DeFi as a whole. I'm talking about DeFi as a lending platform. I do see very marginal utility in the Western part of the world. We don't need much lending and borrowing because it's super cumbersome customer experience. There are insane APY, that have to be somehow sustained by kind of pump and dump schemes. While we need to provide a real service to the part of the world where these services are prevented.
Right.
That's my whole point.
Daniele, you raised a really good point. There's a saying that necessity is the mother of invention, or the father of invention. And if you think about the traditional lending model, you have to go to a bank, right? You have to provide collateral, and you've got to go through a vetting process to determine if you're a risk, a financial risk, or you have payback capabilities. But if you're dealing with someone who's a farmer or who's an artisan in an emerging market, in a rural setting, first, they don't have access to a bank. They have very, very little collateral. They may not have all of the credentials or identity information necessary, or being able to pass the validation test required by the bank. So essentially, that throws out the traditional lending out the window. So here comes micro lending, which allows you to not have any collateral. Access a loan amount that commensurate with your income. So if your monthly income is say $100, right, and based on your trading activities, and you're able to borrow say $50 and pay $10 a month for 5 months. That's a lot more reasonable, and it's something that the bigger banks, who objective is to generate revenue from bigger loans and bigger interest payments, cannot accommodate based on their business model. But if you do a lot of these transactions, it becomes a lot more more feasible and a lot more scalable to that market. So this is why micro lending is so revolutionary. And one of the problems initially with micro lending, and I'm sure Jermaine experienced this as well, is that they had to determine how do you determine the credit worthiness of the lender? You don't know them. They're applying on a cell phone, and you have to let them know within minutes that they're approved or not. You're not sure what their credit worthiness. So what's happening in that sector is that there's a lot of new artificial intelligence technology that's coming in, inexpensive, albeit, that allows micro lenders to evaluate customers in real time based on what kind of phone they're using, based on where they're located physically, based on their contacts that have also attained loans, and to approve a loan or unapprove a loan within seconds, within minutes rather. So that model is really working out, and this is what Wleepay is plans to adopt to serve as our market, is be able to provide women, farmers, traders, those who are underserved, and those who depend on cash for a livelihood, and those who really need loans, but really small loans, to be able to apply directly from their phones and receive a yes or no answer within a few minutes, and be able to make their payments at a reasonable level.
And Lionel, you point out something about AI, and I'm gonna just leave this. This is our spoiler alert for what's upcoming. But Big Blue, IBM just put Watson on the market, and I'm going to talk about that. Why it is so important to have brilliant people as well as brilliant technology behind these business models. And you guys are both brilliant people. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the evolution of AI and how, as it's introduced, artificial intelligence has to be built in considering the first part of it, which is artificial ignorance. So we'll talk about that down the road. But again, I want to thank you for telling us about Wleepay, because this is a super exciting and evolving marketplace. It's big. It is massive. We look at this with 1.3 billion people, 460 million unbanked, and this model of growing into how the market will shift in Africa and in the world. So with that, let's go to the what we need to wrap up with here is, and I'm having a little trouble sharing slides. It's kind of giving us a slideshow flash here. Yeah, exactly. But I
thought it was a special alert.
Yeah, special alert. I think it's kind of that banner thing happening. But I love what we see here. This last slide, which is Mark Cuban on blockchain. It's like the early days of the internet when a lot of people thought we were crazy. And, a lot of people are going to think this is crazy. A lot of people are going to feel like they don't understand what's going on. But I think what you're seeing, and again, driven by this world we now live in with COVID and the lack of the ability to go directly to the market and so forth, what we're actually seeing is we're seeing a major shift in the way that we think about and we model new businesses. And what I'd like to point out more than anything else is this group of people that you're seeing here right now didn't start thinking about this last March. Mm-hmm. We started thinking about this and working on this decades ago. And what I love about today, Elisabeth and Lionel and Daniele, is that you are a breed of people that have thought about this, that took this opportunity right now in the world and said, we're going to make it happen. And maybe even before COVID, you were going about it. But now the world kind of gets what you're talking about. So here's to the crazy ones. And Dan and I love that. It's an old 1997 Apple ad. Here's to the crazy ones. Thank you for being crazy enough to actually bring something this fundamental to what the world needs. At BlockCerts, we're crazy ones too. We love crazy. We love getting out there and shaking it up, making people think out there. As Einstein said, make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. I know what you're doing is not simple. I know it's complex. We're here to help build that with you, and we're very committed to it. Fusion Funder is super exciting. More, as Daniele said, spoiler alerts for next week, new announcements there. Elisabeth, thank you so much for being part of this and bringing this, believing in us, believing in the platform, believing this could even be done, and taking the journey. And Lionel, I mean, there's 460 million people waiting for you. I don't know what you're doing here with us. You got a lot of people to talk to out there. But we're going to help you do that talking, and more than talking, action, make it actually happen. So with that, Dan, this has been an amazing Friday, always my favorite part of the week. And I love this.
Me too. Well, thanks for joining us, both Elisabeth and Lionel. Thanks again. We love what you're doing, and what is awesome about this is that it's bigger than all of us. And when something's bigger than all of us, it has the opportunity for such an impact around the globe, and very exciting to see that. So we can't wait to check in with you again and to see what you're doing, and then also to see the backers that continue to back your business.
And I want to end by saying this, and ask everybody to keep a perspective on the world from here. We started this almost a year ago. It'll be a year ago next month.
Right. And
this week, a very sad milestone was crossed in the United States. 500,000 lives were lost to COVID. And Dan, you just said something that is so relevant. We're in this together.
Yeah.
We're all in this together. And if there's one thing that we can hold hope for with all the lives lost around the world and the millions of people affected directly with COVID, but also all of us affected, is this is about how we collectively come together and succeed at every level. And that's what the world from here is about. And so thank you to everybody who watches us. We've got a lot of supporters out there that are supporting the BlockCerts and this entrepreneurial cloud environment and decentralized cloud environment we're building and delivering. Thank you, everybody. A moment of thought and prayer, if you're a prayer, or just your heart out to the people who we have lost, and that we hope that we can bring all kinds of solutions, whether it's financial, medical, and work, economic solutions to the world, because this is the world from here. We've got a big world, a lot of kids and people depending on us. So thanks for being part of the solution.
Well said. Great. Well,
and
thank you.
With that, I'd like to say, stay safe for sure. Stay healthy, and there's no question. Get digital, stay digital, be digital. That's where it's at. It's all about digital. It's all about how we build this world from here.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again next Friday. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.